The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony of New Haven as Jake Murphy walked through the main street. The administrator loved these early hours when the air was cool and the settlement was just waking up. Children ran past him, on their way to school while their parents headed to work in the asteroid fields above. Jake stopped at the medical center where his wife, Lisa, was already treating patients. She looked up from her desk and smiled at him through the window. After 15 years of marriage, that smile still made his heart skip. Their daughter, Amy, waved from across the street where she waited for the school transport with her friends. New Haven was home to 15,000 people who had come to the edge of human space looking for a better life. The colony sat on the planet Kepler 4 to see, surrounded by rich asteroid fields that provided rare metals and crystals. It was peaceful work, dangerous only when someone made a mistake with the mining equipment. The orbital platforms hummed with activity as cargo ships moved between the asteroids and the planet's surface. Pete Harrison tended his hydroponic gardens in the agricultural dome, growing fresh vegetables that tasted like home to colonists who missed Earth. His tomatoes were famous throughout the colony, and people would trade favors just to get a few for their dinner table. In the engineering section, Maria Santos checked the fusion reactors that powered the colony. She had been working with these machines for 20 years and knew every sound they made. Today, everything ran smoothly, just like every other day. For the past 5 years since the colony was established, Dr. Kevin Ross studied the strange crystals found in the local asteroids at his research station. The formations were unlike anything discovered in other parts of human space. They seemed to store energy in ways that could revolutionize human technology. He had been sending reports to Earth for months, but the distance meant responses took weeks to arrive. The colony's only military protection came from 2 old patrol ships, the UES Dakota and UES Nevada. Captain Ben Clark commanded the small fleet with a crew of retired military personnel who had come to New Haven for the quiet life. The ships carried light pulse cannons designed more for clearing space debris than fighting battles. Ben often joked that the most dangerous thing they faced was asteroid collisions. The ships spent their time escorting cargo haulers and checking the automated defense satellites that orbited the planet. It was boring work, but that was exactly what everyone wanted. The Dakota and Nevada were 40 years old and showed their age. The computers were slow, the weapons were outdated, and the armor was thin by modern standards. But they were reliable, and Ben's crew kept them running with skill and determination. Chief Engineer Ron Hayes could fix anything with spare parts and patience. Amy Murphy attended classes with 200 other children in the colonist school. She was 16 and dreamed of seeing Earth someday, or maybe visiting the great shipyards around Mars. Her teacher, Mrs. Janet White, encouraged her students to think about their futures and what they wanted to accomplish. The children learned about human history and the great expansion into space. They studied mathematics and science, preparing for careers in mining, engineering, or medicine. Some wanted to join Earth Fleet and serve on the great ships that protected human space. Others planned to become explorers, pushing further into the unknown galaxy. Life in New Haven moved at a comfortable pace. People worked hard during the day and gathered in the community center during the evenings. They shared meals, played games, and told stories about their lives before coming to the colony. Many had left Earth or Mars to escape crowded cities and find room to breathe. The colony maintained regular contact with Earth Fleet Command through a communication array that sent messages across the vast distances of space. Supply ships arrived every few months with manufactured goods that could not be produced locally. In return, New Haven shipped refined metals and Dr. Ross's crystal samples back to the inner systems. But New Haven's remote location meant help was far away. If something went wrong, they would be on their own for weeks until rescue ships could arrive. The colonists accepted this risk as part of life on the frontier. They had emergency supplies, backup systems, and each other. The automated defense satellites provided early warning of approaching ships, but they had not been updated in years. The sensors could detect large vessels at a distance, but smaller craft might slip through unnoticed. The satellites carried basic weapons, enough to destroy small asteroids or debris, but nothing that could stop a real military attack. Jake Murphy reviewed the colony's status reports each morning in his office. Production was steady, the population was healthy, and morale remained high. Crime was almost non-existent, limited to occasional disputes over mining claims or personal arguments. The biggest challenge was keeping everyone supplied with entertainment and communication. With families back home, Dr. Kevin Ross made an exciting discovery in his laboratory. The crystals showed unusual energy patterns when exposed to certain frequencies. He believed they might be used to improve starship engines or create more efficient power systems. His notes filled dozens of files as he worked to understand the phenomenon. Maria Santos noticed something strange in the power grid. Readings, there were tiny fluctuations that did not match any known pattern. She ran diagnostics on all systems but could not find the source. The variations were so small that they did not affect colony operations, but they puzzled her engineering mind. Pete Harrison's grandson visited from Earth and marveled at the wide-open spaces of New Haven. The boy had never seen so much room or breathed air that was not recycled through massive city systems. He helped his grandfather in the gardens and learned about growing food in artificial environments. Captain Ben Clark conducted routine patrols around the asteroid fields, checking on mining operations and ensuring the space lanes remained clear. His crew was relaxed and professional. Men and women who had seen combat in their younger days but now enjoyed the peaceful assignment. They maintained their skills but hoped never to use them. The colony's communication officer, Chris Bell, monitored the regular check-ins with Earth Fleet Command. The messages were routine updates on production, population, and security status. Everything indicated New Haven was a model colony, successful and stable. Amy Murphy and her friends often gathered on the observation deck to watch the stars. They could see the lights of the mining platforms and the occasional flash of a ship's engines. The universe seemed vast and beautiful, full of possibilities for their generation. As evening approached, families gathered for dinner in their homes or the community dining halls. Children played in the parks while adults discussed the day's work and made plans for tomorrow. The colony felt safe and prosperous, a testament to human determination and cooperation. Jake Murphy kissed his wife goodnight and checked on his daughter, who was studying for her advanced mathematics exam. Lisa reviewed patient files and prepared for the next day's appointments. Amy read about distant worlds and ancient Earth history before falling asleep. The night shift took over as New Haven settled into peaceful slumber. Security guards made their rounds, checking doors and monitoring systems. The fusion reactors hummed quietly, providing power for the homes and workshops. The orbital platforms continued their work, harvesting resources from the asteroid fields. Far above, the automated defense satellites maintained their silent watch, scanning space for any signs of approaching danger. Their sensors probed the darkness between stars, recording the normal patterns of cosmic radiation and stellar wind. Nothing seemed unusual or threatening, but in the deep black beyond the edge of the system, something moved. Sensors designed for peaceful purposes failed to detect the approaching threat. The colonists of New Haven slept peacefully, unaware that their quiet lives were about to change forever. The stars looked down on a colony that represented the best of humanity, hard-working, people who had built something beautiful in the wilderness of space. They had created a home where children could grow up safely and families could prosper. It was everything the human species hoped to achieve among the stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and discoveries, just like every other day in New Haven, or so they believed as they closed their eyes and dreamed of the future, never imagining that some dreams become nightmares without warning. The attack began at 3 in the morning when most of the colony was asleep. The first sign of trouble came from the automated defense satellites as their sensors detected massive ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The alarms should have sounded immediately, but something was wrong with the communication systems. Captain Ben Clark was drinking coffee on the bridge of the Dakota when his communications officer suddenly looked up in alarm. The man's face went pale as he tried to raise the colony's main communications center. Nothing but static came through the speakers. Ben felt his stomach drop as he realized what was happening. The alien ships were unlike anything in human records. They were dark and angular, covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. The largest vessel was 3 times the size of Earth's biggest battleships. Smaller crafts swarmed around it like angry insects, moving with purpose toward New Haven. Ben ordered his crew to battle stations and tried to send a distress signal to Earth Fleet Command. He managed to transmit a single burst of information before the colony's communication array exploded in a ball of fire. The aliens had jammed all outgoing signals and destroyed the equipment needed to call for help. The EU's Nevada, commanded by Captain Sarah Ross, moved to intercept the alien fighters. Her ship was older than the Dakota and carried even lighter weapons. Sarah had served in the outer colonies for 20 years and knew her ship could not win against such overwhelming force. But she would not abandon the colony without a fight. The first exchange of fire lasted only seconds. The alien plasma weapons tore through the Nevada's shields like they were made of paper. Sarah's ship returned fire with its pulse cannons, but the energy beams barely scratched the alien armor. The Nevada died in a brilliant explosion that lit up the darkness of space. Ben watched his friend's ship disintegrate and felt rage building in his chest. The Dakota accelerated toward the alien formation, all weapons firing. His crew worked desperately to target the enemy vessels, but there were too many of them. Plasma bolts struck the Dakota's hull, melting through armor and destroying vital systems. On the planet's surface, Jake Murphy was awakened by the sound of explosions in orbit. He rushed to his window and saw flashes of light in the sky where the patrol ships were fighting and dying. His wife Lisa appeared beside him, her face filled with terror as she realized what was happening. The colony's emergency sirens finally began wailing, but it was too late for an organized evacuation. The alien ships in orbit opened fire on the planet below, targeting the power plants and communication arrays first. Plasma beams struck the fusion reactors, sending mushroom clouds of fire into the night sky. Maria Santos was at her post in the engineering section when the first plasma bolt hit the main power plant. The explosion threw her across the room and shattered every window in the building. She struggled to her feet, blood running down her face, and tried to restore emergency power to the evacuation shelters. The orbital mining platforms became death traps as alien fighters swarmed among them. The workers had no weapons and nowhere to run. Plasma cannons fired into the habitat modules, vaporizing men and women who had been peacefully sleeping or working the night shift. The platforms exploded one by one, taking hundreds of lives with THEM. Dr. Kevin Ross was in his laboratory when the attack began. He heard the explosions and immediately understood that the colony was under assault by an unknown enemy. His first thought was to protect his research data about the energy crystals. He began uploading everything to a secure transmitter, hoping someone would find it later. A plasma bolt struck the research building just as Kevin finished his transmission. The structure collapsed around him, crushing the scientist who had spent his final moments trying to preserve knowledge that might help humanity. His data burst joined the electromagnetic chaos filling space around New Haven. Pete Harrison and his family huddled in their home as explosions rocked the colony. The old farmer held his grandson close while his daughter tried to calm her crying. "Baby!" Through the windows, they could see buildings burning and people running in panic through the streets. Amy Murphy hid in a storage closet in her family's quarters as alien landing craft descended from orbit. She could hear the whine of their engines and the crash of weapons fire as enemy soldiers began moving through the colony. Her parents had told her to hide and stay quiet no matter what happened. The Zephyrian ground troops moved through New Haven with methodical efficiency. They were tall humanoids with gray skin and black eyes that showed no emotion. Their weapons fired bolts of energy that killed instantly. They showed no mercy to anyone they encountered, executing civilians regardless of age or gender. Jake Murphy tried to organize the colony's defense from the emergency command center, but the building came under immediate attack. Alien soldiers blasted through the doors and began killing everyone inside. Jake died trying to shield a wounded communications officer, cut down by plasma fire as he reached for a weapon. Lisa Murphy was treating injured colonists in the medical center when the aliens found her. She was helping a child with burns when the soldiers entered the building. Her last act was to push the boy behind a cabinet before the plasma bolt struck her down. The medical center became a tomb for patients and staff alike. The agricultural domes offered little protection as alien troops swept through the colony. Pete Harrison and dozens of other families tried to barricade themselves inside, but the thin walls could not stop military weapons. The aliens methodically searched every building, killing anyone they found. Captain Ben Clark and the remaining crew of the Dakota fought until their ship could fight no more. With engines dead and weapons destroyed, they prepared to ram the largest alien vessel. Ben's final words were a promise that Earth would avenge New Haven. The Dakota exploded against the enemy ship's shields, accomplishing nothing except the deaths of brave men and women. The massacre continued for 12 hours as the aliens systematically destroyed everything in the colony. They burned buildings, executed survivors, and loaded prisoners onto their ships. The Zephyrians took special interest in human children and scientists, apparently wanting to study their captives. Amy Murphy pressed her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming as she listened to the sounds of slaughter outside her hiding place. She heard her neighbors being killed and dragged away. The aliens spoke in harsh, clicking voices as they searched the ruins for survivors. When the sun rose over New Haven, the colony was gone. Smoke drifted up from burning buildings while bodies lay scattered in the streets. The orbital platforms had been reduced to debris fields floating among the asteroids. 14,800 people had died in a single night. The surviving colonists, barely 200 in total, found themselves prisoners aboard alien ships. They were kept in small cages like animals, given minimal food and water. Zephyrians studied their captives with cold scientific interest, apparently fascinated by human physiology and psychology. Amy E. Murphy was among the prisoners, traumatized but alive. She had watched through a crack in her hiding place as the aliens executed her father and dragged away wounded survivors. The teenage girl who had dreamed of seeing Earth now faced an uncertain future as a specimen in an alien laboratory. The Zephyrian commander, Warlord Kethva, reviewed the attack from his flagship. The humans had proven even weaker than expected, offering minimal resistance despite their reputation for military skill. The two patrol ships had been destroyed easily, and the ground forces had encountered no organized opposition. The warlord was satisfied with the intelligence gathered during the raid. Human weapons were primitive, their defenses were inadequate, and their soldiers lacked proper training. The species would pose no significant threat to Zephyrian expansion plans. Future attacks could be even more aggressive as the alien fleet prepared to leave New Haven. They believed they had sent a clear message about human weakness. They had killed thousands, captured survivors for study, and destroyed a colony without suffering meaningful losses. The Zephyrians departed confident that humanity would prove easy prey for their expanding empire. But the aliens had made one critical mistake. In their arrogance, they had left evidence of their attack. The quantum signatures of their ships, the energy patterns of their weapons, and the trajectory of their departure would all be recorded by automated systems they had overlooked. New Haven burned behind them as the Zephyrian fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying their prisoners toward an uncertain fate. The colony that had represented humanity's peaceful expansion among the stars was now a monument to alien cruelty and human suffering. 3 days after the attack, the Earth Fleet patrol ship U.S. Guardian dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system. Captain Steve Adams had been looking forward to the routine supply run and a chance to visit the peaceful colony. Instead, his sensors immediately detected the debris fields where the orbital platforms had been. Steve ordered his ship to battle stations and approached the planet carefully. His crew scanned for any signs of hostile vessels, but the system appeared empty except for floating wreckage. Navigation Officer Chris Bell reported massive energy signatures consistent with plasma weapons, far more powerful than anything in human arsenals. The Guardian entered orbit around New Haven, and the crew stared in horror at what remained of the colony. Smoke still rose from the burned buildings while bodies lay scattered in the streets like broken dolls. The fusion reactors had been completely destroyed, leaving craters where the power plants once stood. Captain Adams ordered a full investigation team to the surface while his ship maintained defensive positions. Chief Engineer Ron Hayes led the technical analysis of the weapon signatures, while Medical Officer Don Cooper began the grim task of identifying the dead. The scale of the massacre was beyond anything they had imagined. Weapons specialist Kate Morgan examined the blast patterns and debris from the destroyed patrol ships. The Dakota and Nevada had fought bravely, but stood no chance against their attackers. The enemy weapons used plasma technology that was decades ahead of human capabilities, burning through ship armor like it was thin plastic. The investigation team moved through the ruins of New Haven, documenting every detail of the attack. They found evidence of systematic execution and signs that some colonists had been taken prisoner. The aliens had been thorough and methodical, showing no mercy to civilians who posed no military threat. Ron Hayes analyzed the energy readings from the destroyed power plants and communication arrays. The attacking ships had targeted infrastructure first, cutting off any chance for the colony to call for help or organize an effective defense. The plasma weapons had been calibrated specifically to destroy human technology. In the wreckage of the medical center, Don Cooper found the bodies of Lisa Murphy and dozens of patients who had been killed while seeking treatment. The aliens had shown no respect for medical facilities or wounded civilians. Even children had been executed without hesitation. Ensign Tim Foster was searching through the ruins of the research station when his scanner detected an intact data storage unit buried under the collapsed roof. The device had been shielded by the building's emergency systems and contained the final transmission of Dr. Kevin Ross. Doc Tim carefully extracted the storage unit and brought it back to the Guardian for analysis. The data contained detailed scans of the attacking ships, including their weapon signatures, hull configurations, and quantum drive emissions. Dr. Ross had managed to record everything before his death. Chris Bell worked with the ship's computer to decode the alien vessel data. The attacking fleet had consisted of one massive battleship, 4 heavy cruisers, and at least 20 smaller escort vessels. The ships used technology that was clearly non-human in origin, with design principles unlike anything in Earth databases. The most important discovery came from the quantum drive signatures recorded during the aliens' departure. Every starship left a unique pattern when jumping into hyperspace, like a fingerprint that could be tracked across vast distances. The Guardian sensors detected the direction the enemy fleet had traveled. Captain Adams immediately transmitted all findings to Earth Fleet Command on Mars. The report included complete documentation of the massacre, analysis of alien technology, and the quantum trail that could lead to the attacker's home system. This was humanity's first contact with hostile alien life, and it had resulted in genocide. Admiral Helen Carter received the transmission at Mars Command and immediately understood the implications. The attack on New Haven was not random piracy, but a calculated military strike by an organized alien civilization. The evidence suggested this was a probing attack to test human defenses and gather intelligence. Intelligence analyst Paul Wright was assigned to lead the investigation into the alien threat. He worked around the clock analyzing every piece of data from New Haven, comparing it with astronomical records and deep space sensor readings. The quantum trail led toward a star system 43, light years away in the constellation Draco. Paul's analysis revealed disturbing patterns in recent sensor data from the outer colonies. Several remote monitoring stations had detected unusual energy signatures in the months before the New Haven attack. The aliens had been observing human space for some time, studying their targets before striking. The alien ship designs showed clear military purpose with heavy armor and massive weapon systems. This was not a species that engaged in peaceful exploration, but one that specialized in conquest and destruction. Their technology was advanced enough to make them a serious threat to all human colonies. Admiral Carter convened an emergency meeting of the Fleet Command Council to discuss humanity's response. The admirals and generals reviewed the evidence while considering their limited options. They could fortify human space defensively or launch a retaliatory strike into unknown territory against an enemy of unknown strength. General Mark Johnson argued for immediate military action, stating that the aliens had committed an act of war that demanded swift punishment. Admiral Susan Davis favored a defensive strategy, believing humanity needed time to understand the threat and prepare adequate defenses. The debate continued for hours as the implications became clear. Paul Wright presented his final analysis to the council, revealing the full scope of the alien threat. Long-range sensors detected multiple ship movements in the target system, suggesting a significant military presence. The attacking fleet was likely just a small portion of the enemy's total forces. The intelligence also indicated that the aliens had deliberately chosen New Haven as their target. The colony's remote location and Minimal defenses made it an ideal testing ground for human military capabilities. The attackers had gathered valuable information about human technology, psychology, and response times. Back at New Haven, the Guardian's crew continued their investigation of the crime scene. They found personal belongings scattered throughout. The ruins remind us of the lives that had been destroyed. Amy Murphy's school books lay burned in the wreckage of her home, a testament to dreams that would never be fulfilled. The crew also discovered that the aliens had shown particular interest in human children and scientists. Several bodies were missing from locations where families had been hiding, suggesting that some colonists had been taken alive for unknown purposes. The implications were disturbing to consider. Captain Adams walked through the ruins of the colony's main street, trying to imagine what life had been like before the attack. The burned remains of Pete Harrison's gardens and Maria Santos's engineering workshop told stories of hard-working people who had built something beautiful in the wilderness of space. The Guardian's investigation team worked for 2 weeks, documenting every aspect of the massacre and gathering evidence that might help identify the attackers. They recovered personal effects to return to families on Earth and Mars. Small mementos of lives cut short by alien cruelty. Admiral Carter made her decision after reviewing all available evidence and consulting with Earth's political leadership. Humanity would not cower in fear while aliens murdered innocent civilians. The attackers would be hunted down and punished, regardless of the cost or risk involved. The order went out to Earth's shipyards and military academies to begin immediate preparations for war. New ships would be built, weapons would be upgraded, and crews would be trained for combat against an alien enemy. The peaceful expansion of humanity among the stars had ended with the burning of New Haven. Paul Wright's final report identified the alien home system and estimated the strength of their military forces. The enemy possessed significant technological advantages but appeared to underestimate human determination and resourcefulness. Their greatest weakness was their arrogance in believing other species were inferior. The quantum trail left by the attacking ships provided a clear path for human retaliation. Earth fleet would follow that trail to its source and deliver justice for the people of New Haven. The aliens had awakened something dangerous in humanity by targeting defenseless civilians. The Guardian prepared to leave New Haven's orbit. Captain Adams took one last look at the ruined colony. The smoking remains would serve as a monument to alien brutality and a reminder of why humanity needed to be strong. The dead would not be forgotten, and they would be avenged. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying evidence of humanity's first contact with hostile alien life. Behind them, New Haven burned in silence, a testament to the price of being defenseless in a dangerous galaxy. But the aliens who had committed this atrocity would soon learn that humanity protected its own, and that some acts of evil could never be forgiven. 6 months after the New Haven massacre, Task Force Vengeance emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian home system. The human fleet appeared like ghosts in the darkness, their new stealth technology making them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Admiral Jack Williams stood on the bridge of the dreadnought U.S. Retribution, watching his tactical display with cold satisfaction. The task force represented the best of human military engineering. The Retribution was the largest warship humanity had ever built. Armed with experimental weapons and protected by adaptive armor that could adjust to different types of attacks, heavy cruisers U.S. Justice and U.S. Fury flanked the flagship, while destroyers and frigates spread out in attack formation. Human engineers had spent months studying the alien technology recovered from New Haven. They learned how Zephyrian plasma weapons worked and developed countermeasures that could absorb or deflect the energy beams. The aliens' greatest advantage had been neutralized through human ingenuity and determination. The fleet had trained relentlessly for this mission, practicing coordinated attacks and defensive maneuvers. Every crew member knew what they were fighting for and why they had traveled so far from home. The faces of New Haven's children were painted on fighter cockpits and torpedo warheads, a reminder of innocent lives lost to alien cruelty. Admiral Williams reviewed the intelligence reports one final time before beginning the attack. The Zephyrian system contained multiple military installations and a large fleet of warships. The aliens believed themselves safe in their home territory, protected by superior technology and overwhelming numbers. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first contact came when a Zephyrian patrol squadron detected unusual sensor readings. Near the system's outer planets, the alien ships moved to investigate, following standard procedures that had worked for centuries of conquest. They expected to find nothing more threatening than space debris or natural phenomena. Captain Nick Parker commanded the destroyer U.S. Wolverine as it stalked the enemy patrol. His ship moved silently through the asteroid field, using the rocks for cover while targeting systems locked onto the approaching aliens. The Zephyrians had no idea death was already reaching for them. The ambush was perfect. The Wolverine and her sister ship U.S. Viper opened fire simultaneously, their railguns sending solid projectiles at incredible speed. The kinetic rounds punched through alien shields and armor like they were made of paper. For Zephyrian ships died before they could send a warning or return fire. Captain Sam Davis watched the enemy vessels explode with grim satisfaction. His crew had trained for months to achieve this level of precision, learning to coordinate their attacks with split timing. The aliens who had murdered defenseless civilians now faced warriors who knew how to fight. The destruction of the patrol squadron sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian command structure. Warlord Kethver, who had led the attack on New Haven, ordered immediate reinforcements to the outer system. He believed the small human force had somehow tracked him home and could be easily destroyed. Admiral Williams smiled as enemy ships began moving toward his position. The Zephyrians were reacting exactly as human strategists had predicted, sending their forces piecemeal instead of concentrating for a coordinated defense. Each enemy squadron would be outnumbered and outfought by superior human tactics. The second engagement took place near the system's main shipping lanes as Zephyrian heavy cruisers moved to intercept the human raiders. The alien commanders expected an easy victory against what they assumed were primitive human vessels. Instead, they found themselves facing technology they had never seen before. Commander Lisa Fox led a squadron of human fighters that danced around the massive alien ships like angry hornets. The small craft used advanced maneuvering systems to avoid plasma fire while targeting specific weak points in enemy armor. Her pilots struck with surgical precision, crippling weapons and engines. Before the aliens could respond effectively, the Zephyrian cruisers found their plasma cannons unable to track the nimble human fighters. The weapons that had easily destroyed the old patrol ships at New Haven could not hit targets that moved so quickly and unpredictably. Frustration mounted as the aliens watched their massive vessels being picked apart by tiny opponents. Captain Greg Stone commanded the heavy cruiser U.S. Fury as it engaged the alien flagship. His ship's new adaptive armor absorbed the first plasma volleys while advanced targeting computers tracked the enemy vessel's weak points. When the Fury returned fire, her weapons struck with devastating accuracy. The battle turned when Admiral Williams ordered the Retribution to engage the enemy directly. The massive dreadnought emerged from stealth like a ghost materializing from nightmare. Her weapons already locked onto the largest Zephyrian vessel. The Admiral personally oversaw the firing of humanity's most secret weapon. The antimatter torpedoes were humanity's answer to alien technological superiority. The weapons contained enough destructive force to crack a planet's crust, focused into warheads small enough to penetrate enemy defenses. When they struck the Zephyrian flagship, the results were spectacular and terrifying. Warlord Kethver watched in horror as his mighty vessel began breaking apart around him. The bridge filled with smoke and sparks as hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. His officers screamed orders that no one could hear over the roar of escaping air and failing systems. The alien commander tried to understand how the humans had become so powerful in just 6 months. The species that had offered no resistance at New Haven now fought with skill and technology that surpassed even Zephyrian military science. His final thought was a question he would never answer. Colonel Mike Stone led Marine boarding parties that captured intact alien vessels for intelligence gathering. The human soldiers moved through enemy ships with professional efficiency, securing technology and taking prisoners for interrogation. They followed the laws of war. Despite the crimes committed against New Haven, the Marines found evidence of other attacks by Zephyrian forces against defenseless worlds. Computer records showed dozens of massacres committed across local space, each one targeting civilian populations unable to defend themselves. The aliens had built their empire on the systematic murder of innocents. The captured Zephyrians were amazed to find themselves treated according to military protocols instead of being executed immediately. Human soldiers provided medical care for wounded prisoners and followed Geneva Convention guidelines that the aliens had never heard of. The concept of mercy toward defeated enemies was completely foreign to their experience. Admiral Williams coordinated the destruction of the remaining enemy vessels with cold precision. His fleet moved through the Zephyrian formation like a surgical instrument, cutting out specific targets while avoiding unnecessary casualties. Every shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy when possible. The human tactical advantage became clear as the battle progressed. Zephyrian ships were designed for attacking helpless opponents, not fighting equal or superior forces. Their weapons were powerful but slow to retarget, and their defensive systems could not adapt to new threats quickly enough. Captain Sue Graham's engineering teams jammed alien communications and disrupted their coordination protocols. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting individual battles instead of a coordinated defense. Each ship isolated and vulnerable to concentrated human attacks. Their superior numbers became meaningless without effective command and control. The final phase of the battle saw human forces systematically hunting down fleeing enemy vessels. The aliens who had shown no mercy to New Haven's civilians now begged for quarter as their ships were disabled one by one. Admiral Williams granted it to those who surrendered, demonstrating the difference between human justice and alien brutality. As the last Zephyrian warship surrendered, Admiral Williams stood on his bridge surrounded by the debris of an enemy fleet. The aliens who had believed themselves invincible now drifted helplessly in space, their technology proven inferior to human determination and ingenuity. The hunt for New Haven's killers was nearly complete, but one target remained. The main Zephyrian base on the system's primary planet still held human prisoners, and the command structure responsible for ordering the massacre. Admiral Williams set course for the planet's surface, where the final reckoning would take place. Behind the human fleet, burning alien ships marked the path of vengeance. The Zephyrians had learned too late that humanity protected its own with a fury that could cross the galaxy. The defenseless colonists of New Haven would be avenged before the sun set on the alien homeworld. The assault on the main Zephyrian base began at dawn as human ships descended through the planet's atmosphere like falling stars. Admiral Jack Williams watched from the Retribution's bridge as his fleet took positions around the massive alien complex. The base sprawled across 50 square miles of gray landscape, protected by energy shields and orbital defense platforms. Major Tom Clark led the first wave of human Marines as their dropships cut through the morning sky. The soldiers had trained for months to rescue the surviving prisoners from New Haven, studying every detail of Zephyrian architecture and defensive systems. They carried specialized equipment designed to penetrate alien barriers and locate human captives. The orbital defenses opened fire as the human ships approached, sending streams of plasma into the sky. But the aliens discovered their weapons could not penetrate the new human shield technology. Captain Sue Graham's engineers had developed adaptive barriers that absorbed energy attacks and converted them into power for the ship's own systems. Supreme Commander Veltar stood in the main command center, watching his defenses fail against the human assault. The alien leader had dismissed reports of the fleet battle in orbit, believing his ground forces could handle any landing attempt. Now he watched in growing alarm as human ships brushed aside his most powerful weapons. The first Marine dropships landed near the prison facility where New Haven's survivors were being held. Amy Murphy pressed her face against the small window of her cell as she heard explosions and weapons fire drawing closer. After 6 months of captivity and experimentation, the teenage girl had lost hope of ever seeing home again. Colonel Mike Stone's intelligence teams had identified the prison complex using data recovered from captured Zephyrian ships. The building was heavily fortified and surrounded by automated defenses, but human engineers had studied the alien technology and found weaknesses that could be exploited. The Marines moved through the base with deadly efficiency, their advanced armor protecting them from Zephyrian plasma weapons while their own guns fired kinetic rounds that punched through alien defenses. Sergeant Bill Hayes led his squad through the outer perimeter, clearing guard towers and defensive positions inside the command center. Veltar tried to coordinate his forces against the human attack, but the aliens found their communication systems jammed by human electronic warfare specialists. Each defensive position fought alone, unable to call for reinforcement or coordinate with neighboring units. Amy Murphy heard human voices in the corridor outside her cell and began crying. With relief, the voices spoke English with accents from Earth and Mars, calling out that they were there to rescue the prisoners. After months of alien captivity, the sound of her own language was like music to her ears. The prison guards tried to execute their captives before the humans could reach them, but Marine assault teams breached the facility with explosive charges and flashbang grenades. The aliens found themselves facing soldiers who moved with purpose and fired with precision, nothing like the helpless civilians they had massacred at New Haven. Lieutenant Brad Clark, son of the fallen Captain Ben Clark, led the team that found Amy Murphy and the other surviving children. The young officer's face was grim as he saw the conditions the prisoners had endured. Medical experiments had left scars on many of the survivors, evidence of alien cruelty that would never be forgotten. Dr. Ellen Wright followed the assault teams into the prison, carrying medical supplies and trauma counseling equipment. The human doctor had volunteered for the mission after reading reports of the alien experiments on captured colonists. She worked quickly to stabilize the weakest prisoners for evacuation. Amy Murphy looked up at Lieutenant Clark and recognized something familiar in his face. When he told her his name, she remembered his father and the brave crew of the Dakota who had died trying to protect New Haven. The circle of vengeance was closing as the children of the dead rescued the survivors of the massacre. The human forces systematically destroyed every military installation in the base while carefully avoiding civilian areas. Admiral Williams had given strict orders that non-combatants were not to be harmed, demonstrating the difference between human justice and alien brutality. Mercy was a concept the Zephyrians were learning for the first time. Supreme Commander Veltar attempted to negotiate as his defenses crumbled around him. He offered tribute and promised to avoid human space, expecting the humans to accept submission like other conquered species had done throughout Zephyrian history. The alien leader could not understand why the humans refused his terms. Communication? Officer Rachel Stone broadcast Admiral Williams' response across the planet and into deep space. The message was simple and direct. Humanity protected its own, and those who harmed innocents would face complete destruction. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no mercy for the killers of New Haven. The rescue of the prisoners revealed the full scope of Zephyrian crimes against humanity. The aliens had conducted medical experiments on children, tortured adults for information, and killed dozens of captives who became too weak to survive the testing. The evidence would be presented to the galactic community as proof of alien barbarism. Colonel Stone's teams captured the alien research facilities intact, recovering detailed records of the experiments performed on human subjects. The data would help human scientists understand Zephyrian technology while providing evidence for war crimes tribunals. Justice would be served in courtrooms as well as battlefields. The human fleet methodically destroyed every Zephyrian military asset in the system while leaving civilian infrastructure untouched. Orbital shipyards exploded in silent fireballs, while ground-based weapon factories were reduced to smoking craters. The alien empire's ability to threaten others was being systematically eliminated. Amy Murphy stood on the observation deck of a human transport ship, watching her rescuers complete their work. The young woman who had lost her parents and her home now saw justice being delivered with surgical precision. The nightmares of captivity were ending as human ships imposed a new reality on the galaxy. The surviving Zephyrian leadership was taken into custody for trial on Earth. Supreme Commander Veltar and his officers would face justice for their crimes against humanity and other species. The galaxy would see that humans held their enemies accountable according to law rather than simple revenge. Captain Greg Stone reported the discovery of additional prison facilities containing captives from other worlds. The Zephyrians had been conducting a systematic campaign of conquest and enslavement across local space. Human forces began liberation operations to free all the alien prisoners. The rescued colonists from New Haven were given priority medical treatment aboard the human ships. Many suffered from physical and psychological trauma that would take years to heal, but they were alive and free. Their survival was testament to human determination to protect its own people. Admiral Williams stood on his bridge as the last Siferian military installation exploded in the distance. The mission was complete, and New Haven had been avenged. The aliens who had believed humans were weak and defenseless now faced the reality of human military power backed by unbreakable moral purpose. The human fleet prepared to return home carrying the rescued prisoners and evidence of alien war crimes. Behind them, the Zephyrian Empire began its collapse as subject species learned of their oppressors' defeat. The galaxy was discovering that humanity would not tolerate predators who targeted the innocent. Amy Murphy requested permission to visit the ship's memorial wall where the names of New Haven's dead were displayed. She placed her hand on her parents' names and whispered a promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. The daughter of murdered colonists had become a symbol of human resilience and the price of attacking the defenseless. The journey home took 3 weeks, during which the rescued prisoners began to heal from their ordeal. Human medical teams worked around the clock to treat physical injuries while counselors helped survivors process their trauma. The colony that had been destroyed would live on in the memories and determination of those who survived. Earth's defense networks detected the returning fleet and broadcast news of the mission's success across human space. The colonists who had died at New Haven were finally at rest, their deaths avenged and their killers brought to justice. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy in the most definitive way possible. Amy Murphy stood at the viewport as Earth appeared in the distance, blue and beautiful and safe. She was coming home to a world that would never again allow its children to face such horror alone. The galaxy had learned that humanity protected its own with a fury that could cross the stars and topple empires.